What was the most memorable workplace meltdown you ever witnessed? I saw two stonemasons get in a fist fight when I worked construction. I was laying electrical underground pipe, and they were laying block wall. One threw a hammer at the other one and hit him in the head, cracked his eye socket. Cops came and took our statements and the guy got arrested for assault. After he was arrested, I guess he was no longer a Freemason. I worked in a building with a cafeteria in it. We noticed that one of the everyday cashiers had stopped showing up to work and found out that she had passed away. My co-worker asked who we were talking about and upon finding out, stood up from her desk, flung herself to the ground, and proceeded to roll back and forth crying as loud as she could. We all freaked out. We had customers on the phone we had to put on hold until we could get her to her feet and someone could escort her somewhere else so she could calm down. She took the next few days off, including the day of the funeral. Assuming she had gone to the funeral, we asked her how it was. She answered with, I didn't go. I barely knew her. She saw her opportunity and she took it. Just too stupid to keep it going. This crazy lady they hired as a cashier didn't take getting fired too well. After they fired her, she told the owner to frick off and proceeded to ram his truck with her car as she left. And it's funny because it barely dented the owner's bumper, but her car got really fricked up. I don't even think he pressed charges. Worked in a video store when there was such a thing. My co-worker showed up very high. He was also about 6 feet 3 inches and 140 pounds, so he stood out in a crowd to begin with. Anyway, he came in for a 4-hour shift, stood in the middle of our bank of checkout registers, and just ate chips. Like 6 bags of chips back to back, and he ate them slow and savored the crap out of each bite. The whole time he had zero facial expression. Think of the dull stare of a chewing dairy cow. After about 3 hours he calmly turns to me and says, "I can't do this anymore," gently sets down his bag of chips and walks out the door. We never saw him in the store again. 6 feet 3 inches and 140 pounds. I'm having a hard time imagining how skinny that is. My own was working at a Target store as the electronics team lead, which mostly meant standing at the camera counter waiting for someone to need something. At the time of the release of the Nintendo Wii, it had a very poor launch with a lot of scarcity. My store was kind of in a rural area and we usually got like maybe 6 consoles a week shipped to us, maybe 3 at a time, 2 random days. They came through our regular truck system at 4 AM and were immediately put onto the shelf in lockup. First come first serve. Even team members had to wait until 8 AM and were not allowed to put one aside. At the height of the frenzy, we had customers waiting at the door, like 5-8 of them usually, every single day to try and get one. With that said, I had a woman who would come in every single day at around 1 PM and ask if we had any. Every day, I repeated what I typed above about how if she wants one she's going to have to get up earlier because they're always gone by 8:15. She always accused us of stockpiling them in the back, saying things like, "Oh, I know you have them. You're lying. Who are you holding them for?" I am the epitome of a good service person at this point in time. I am polite, patient, and attempting to give her all the info I can to help her attain one of these consoles. As December edges on and this woman still has not managed to change her tactics, or, unsurprisingly, get a freaking Wii. She finally found my breaking point when she screamed this at me, "You are going to ruin my kid's Christmas." I couldn't take it anymore. I was done with this woman. I slammed my hands down on the counter and said something to the effect of, "You know what? I'm done. There is nothing in this world that I want more than to ruin Christmas. For you. And for your kids. I hate Christmas. I hate your children. I have a dream about building a fort out of Nintendo Wii's and hiding in it when I see you coming. Do you want to see the stockroom? It's right over there. And if you find a Wii console in it I will buy IT for you." I held out my magnet keys, knowing she OBV wouldn't take them, while she stood there with her mouth agape for a little while, and then, without saying a word, turned and left. I never saw her again, and miraculously, she apparently didn't say anything to anyone on her way out, because I continued working there without any of my co-workers ever knowing it had happened. I felt guilty at one point, but mostly just satisfied. Looking back, now I wouldn't be able to basically scream at a customer without cursing, and that would definitely get me fired. There is nothing in this world that I want more than to ruin Christmas. For you. And for your kids. I hate Christmas. I hate your children. I have a dream about building a fort out of Nintendo Wii's and hiding in it when I see you coming. This is what I've been looking for. I wasn't the one that got fired, but I watched it happen. I was at Publix getting a sub when I hear this. Manager, what the heck are you doing? You know I have to fire you for doing this again. Worker, what is the problem? I didn't do anything wrong. Manager, you are allowed to get something to eat on your break, not eat while you're packing food. Worker, so I had a couple chicken wings. It's not that big of a deal. Manager, there are 50 wings in the bottom of that trash can. Nothing else was said and the manager escorted the wing eater out. The guy was making baskets of wings and was basically going one for the basket, one for me and eating his way through the batch of wings. Best part was the two people making subs just start laughing and one goes, if the manager knew how much that guy has eaten in the 2 weeks he has worked here, he would crap a brick. The other day he just sat there eating a whole container of potato salad while he was working the fryer. The same thing happened to my uncle when he got his first job as a teen. Heard this story from my mom. In the kitchen, whenever he walked by the tray of bacon, he'd eat a piece of bacon. Finally, someone ordered a BLT, but there was no bacon. My uncle had eaten all the bacon and got fired on his first day. I worked in a shop as a cashier for a while and during a really busy rush period there's only me and this other woman on tills. Anyway, we're working away and suddenly there's a police officer and my manager watching and they point at the woman working with me. Then they promptly walk over and take her away. She didn't go easy though. She was doing the whole sovereign citizen thing, shouting about rights she thought she had, like a lawyer being present at the arrest or whatever, then started crying about needing to get her son or whatever. I distinctly remember this because I was annoyed they didn't put anyone else on to help me and a customer made a snarky comment about queue times. Like my colleague just legit got arrested for theft. What do you want me to do, Linda? Go put your £8 candle through the freaking self-service. Christ. That last bit made me laugh so hard. Customer pettiness described perfectly. I got into a screaming match with my boss. He was furious, and after the altercation, I saw him head to the elevator. I knew he was going to human resources, so I ran down the stairs and beat him to the HR office by about 20 seconds. He had to sit in the HR waiting room for half an hour until I was done speaking to them, which made him even more furious. At my old store, we had a high schooler employed as a cashier because her dad worked as the deli assistant manager. Everything was fine. She was a little bratty and wouldn't listen to me or any of the other service leads, but she did her job alright. Her dad got caught selling ecstasy and weed in the parking lot and was arrested, and she was promptly put under investigation too. Eventually they found out that she had been stealing from her register and she was arrested during one of my shifts. I watched as they told her why she was being arrested, that charges were being pressed, and that she was officially fired. This 16-year-old tries to resist arrest, falls to the ground and begins to beat on the floor while tearing at her uniform. They managed to get her hands behind her back after she'd gotten her shirt off. Once she's in cuffs she begins to shout that she's going to sue everyone because they are looking at her body and she's underage and don't they know who she is and she knows people who will frick us all up. They put her in the back of the cop car and she thrashed around trying to escape, banging on the divider and trying to get her hands on the cops. Not sure what happened to her after they drove away. Man, she threw herself prostrate and rent her garb. All she had to do is shave her head and throw dirt on herself and it'd be a full old biblical freakout. My wife and I were walking in downtown Chicago last summer and we saw two furniture movers get into a tiff. We slowed our pace to witness the bit of drama that escalated into one of the guys using a floor lamp like a baseball bat while the other's weapon of choice was a freaking bird bath. $10 on bird bath. Worked with a sales rep who was about to get fired for faking his expense reports. He knew it was going to happen because corporate called the restaurant where he was pulling his scam from and they did some research and found it all out and got the law involved. He took his company car, a Saab 9000 CD, and left it in the worst part of town with the keys in it, hoping it would get stolen. Pure spite on his part. Unfortunately, he didn't plan for how he was going to get out of this part of town, so he got mugged and the crap kicked out of him. Ambulance came and took him to the ER. I should add here that he was about 25 or so and a complete jackass. The interesting part, he tried to go out on work comp due to his injuries and stayed away from the office because he knew he was going to get fired. I had to visit him at his home and explain that he was going to be fired and that he could keep the law out of this if he paid the money back. It was $2,500. He said he was on pain pills due to his injuries and couldn't understand what I was saying. He stays at home for 2 weeks, recovering from his injuries. Here's the meltdown. After the doctor releases him, he comes back to work. The day he comes back, the legal team and the police are waiting for him. He gets formally fired and the police arrest him. I should add that the whole thing was being recorded by the legal team on video. After they put the cuffs on him, he immediately drops to the ground screaming that he is injured and in severe pain and doesn't deserve to be treated like this. The police grab him and throw him in the back of the police car while he is screaming like a baby the whole time. What he didn't know is that there was a video camera in the police car. Once the police put him in the back of the car and then went back inside, leaving him alone in the car, he stopped crying and started laughing. This dragged on for years. My firm refused to back down and we prosecuted him for everything we could. I feel bad for laughing, but that whole imagery of him being smug and leaving the company vehicle out there to get stolen, only to get jumped and pummeled on the way back, made me chortle. He really did not think that through. My own. I worked as a pharmacy technician on night shifts. It was the only 24-hour pharmacy close to a hospital with a staggeringly busier room. Percocet was handed out like candy. Well, we had this one repeat offender who was everything wrong with the system. She doctor shopped, screamed the walls down if she didn't get what she wanted, and called us every name under the sun. Management didn't care because it was business as usual, and furthermore, when you get into working night shifts at a pharmacy in a city, you start to understand the element. I had an exceptional level of patience, until one day she just got under my skin. Her copay was 50 cents. She screamed at me because her copay was usually zero, not true, and that she couldn't afford it. She had just bought cigarettes at the front counter. By the way, she got in my face and screamed that I was trying to kill her and that she wouldn't be able to take care of her son. She then turned to him and pointed at me, saying I was the terrible woman that was killing mommy. I lost it. I don't know why this moment did it, but it did. I slammed my hands down on the counter, came from behind the register, and got face to face with her, telling her she needed to leave before I called the cops because I was sick of her crap. She squared up with me, nose to nose, but when she saw I wasn't backing down, she stepped back and then proceeded to ask me to pay the 50 cents for her copay. She told me I could afford it. My co-worker saw what was going on and pushed me to the back room to chill out. I don't know how that situation ended because I was in the back room blowing off steam, but the next time the lady came back she refused to be helped by me, which was probably best. I'm not proud of my ridiculous behavior, and I can't defend myself for that, but man, I had never felt anger like that before. Man, sometimes you can only be pushed too far. I feel like it's a real problem in North America that as employees in the service industry we are just expected to always take people's crap. It's not right, and it lets buttholes continue to be buttholes. I didn't actually witness this, I did it. I was working at a Wendy's my senior year of high school, with that being my second job. The first was the McDonald's across the street. McDonald's taught me drive-through, and Wendy's got 1/10th the business, so I was a drive-through goddess. One night there was a football game we didn't know about, and when it let out we got absolutely slammed. I was working 3 positions in drive-through, which I could handle, but when I had to do fries I couldn't deal with it. I asked the guy who was working front counter, who hadn't had a customer in about an hour, to hop on fries and help me out. He mumbled something and walked over there. I relax and go back to drive-through, and when I go to bag my order I see all this kid did was drop a basket of fries, not make any of the 20+ orders we had. At first I was like, frick him, I got this, and made a large fry. I then turned and threw it at him, calling him a lazy incompetent butthole, you can't even work a fast food job. Walked back to the office and tossed my headset at the manager and told him I quit. I love how this story is I'm handling it, then boom, frick you, I'm out. Suit guy. We worked in a business casual office. Most of us just wore button-up shirts, decent pants and dress shoes every day. However, Suit guy showed up as a new hire and wore the same exact tan suit every day for the 3 months he was there, which is what earned him the nickname. He also drank a large coffee, a Monster energy drink and a can of Mountain Dew in that order between when he walked in at 8 and when he had lunch at noon. Apparently he was going through a divorce that was getting pretty contentious, and the combination of caffeine and rage put him over his boiling point one morning when he began screaming at his phone while at his desk and then broke his cell phone in half. This was 2012, so it was a full screen smartphone that he somehow bent until it broke. I don't know how he did it. My friends and I tried to replicate it using one of my old phones a couple days later and we could cause some bending, but no break. He came in the next day with a new phone and acted like he hadn't made a scene the day before. I feel bad for that guy. I work in hospitality. Our old head of housekeeping was a small Polish woman with a Spitfire personality. She refused to hire minorities or heavier women, even though some of the best cleaners we've ever had were one of those too. She worked 7 days a week, at least 50 hours total. She was burning herself out hardcore. She was very paranoid and always afraid someone was out to get her position. Well, one morning she got into it with one of our best housekeepers. She grabbed the woman's wrist and gave her an Indian burn. Then she came to the front desk, yelling and screaming, and threw herself to the floor, like a toddler having a tantrum, kicking her arms and legs. This was in the middle of a busy check-in window as well, and here she is rolling on the ground crying and yelling. I looked at her and said, "Get your butt to the office if you're going to have a meltdown." So she picked herself up, then threw herself down in the office and finished her tantrum there. She was fired that day. They're called Chinese burns in the UK. It's nice that we have differences in our gentle racism. There was an Arab man named Ahmed that delivered food to the factory I worked at a few years ago. He was the nicest guy I ever met. Always gave me free food just for being respectful to him. One day he was delivering food to employees who had to work on Sunday and they were all whining and complaining about how unfair it is, even though they were being paid double time. Apparently, Ahmed had heard enough because in front of the whole plant, he began to scream at all of them for being ungrateful cribbies, and reminded them how good they have it in America. I had never seen the factory so quiet. I asked him what was up as he left and he explained to me how he had come here from the Middle East to escape famine and terrorism, and he started with nothing and worked all day every day to get where he is now. It was one of the most motivating things I've ever witnessed. There was a guy I used to work with. He was the most boring, straight-laced guy you could ever meet. He was very into entomology and environmental presentation. He used to do things like count the crayfish in a patch of creek at the weekend. He spoke very quietly, and I often couldn't hear him even when I sat right next to him. We worked in a call center, and he was renowned as one of the best agents you could get calling through. He was so patient and gentle with even the dumbest sheep of customers. It was hard on him though. He was the kind of guy who flushes really obviously when he got pee off. You could sit next to him watching him quietly seethe as he gently said, "Yes ma'am. Now if you could just click the text under the sign and button that says forgotten you details." Then one afternoon he just couldn't hack it anymore. I have no idea what it was that got to him. This woman must have said something though, cause he just screamed frick off down the phone line and threw his headset across his desk. Then he picked up his office chair and kind of rammed it into the wall and marched out the room. 10 minutes later he came back, quietly apologized to the manager, and carried on as if nothing had happened. Was interning at a local ABC news station for a while. One day, I was alone on the set sitting on one of those couches you always see anchors sitting on in morning shows. I was waiting for my boss to come down and tape something for his show. Enter the weatherman. He walks over to his desk, looks at something on the computer, stands up, slams his hand on the table and yells at the top of his lungs, "This is so freaking out of control. Are you freaking kidding me? God damn it." Then straightens up his tie, calmly and coolly walks by me again and says, "Pardon my French," and walks out the door. I sit for a minute in shock and then go upstairs. Turns out the National Weather Service was trying to get him in trouble because someone reported a live tornado in a distant corner of the state when there actually wasn't a tornado at all, and caused the sirens to go off. I think that's at least what I got out of what him and the other weatherman were talking about. While I was at college learning metalworking, Our teacher got so pissed off with the complete lack of respect attention by his students that he stormed out of the engineering lab and got in his car then drove off, only to hit a lamppost at nearly 30 miles per hour. He got out of his car, pushed it off the lamppost, which fell over and nearly took him out. He drove off with steam coming out of the bonnet of his new Porsche. Meanwhile, he had left an aluminium crucible on full heat which literally went into meltdown. Molten metal started bubbling and bursting out of the crucible like a volcano. Where the molten metal touched anything flammable, it started a fire. When molten metal starts erupting, you know you're having a bad day. He was remarkably not fired, and all of his students made rapid life adjustments and never disrespected him again. Learning metalworking, our teacher got so pissed off with the complete lack of respect attention by his students. Quit screwing around. You screw around too much. Was shopping at a stop-and shop one day about 10 years back, picking up some odds and ends before going home when I overheard some guy getting torn down by his manager. He was in the process of cleaning up broken jar of jam or some such and his manager was just totally ripping into him. Do you know how long this mess has been here? Why does it seem like I'm always leading you around like a dog just to get you to work? Do you know how many people would kill to have your job? The worker was a skinny dude, maybe 17 or 18, and was sort of just gritting his teeth and keeping it cool despite the barrage of insults. After he gets things cleaned up, he pushes the mop bucket away down the aisle and the manager walks off. I go into the aisle to get some peanut butter and just see him stop in his tracks and take a deep, shuddering breath. His hands clench and unclench, and he walks on. I continue shopping and he disappears. About 10 minutes later, as I'm checking out, I once again see this manager publicly tear into the same guy for not being upfront and bagging for customers. Despite repeated calls he's doing the best he can bagging while under this duress, but eventually lets I'm doing the best I can man out under his breath. This seems to incense the manager who goes on about how his best isn't good enough and how he's not representing the Stop and Shop brand. The kid finally just stops working and stares at the manager for a moment before, with arms shuddering with rage, grabbing at his shirt. With a rage-filled yell that silences the checkout area, he rips the shirt off his chest like freaking Hulk Hogan, throws it into his manager's face, then calmly walks out of the store. Everyone's just shocked, and the manager walks away speechless with the remains of the shirt. The silence is pierced by someone on the intercom saying clean up aisle 7 and once more items are checked out. That manager is a dickhead. It sounds like they were on a power trip. When I was a teenager, I worked at a job where the general manager's husband was sleeping with the assistant manager. The assistant manager flaunted it too. She would go around saying things like, "He told me I give better head than you do, and no wonder your husband cheats. I would cheat if I were married to you." Anyway, one day, the general manager finally snaps and they get into a full-on catfight right in front of the entire store. We had to call the police to break them up. It is pretty bad when the teenage crew can act more civilized than the adult managers. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.